So Chris Turney is a 4-time world ride and tie champion. His high school cross country team was inducted into the Hall of Fame. He's done the Western States twice. So he knows how to transform the body of a civilian into a body of an athlete that will take on conditions for which you have no control, but you want to be ready to adapt to and excel in. And we will do some raffling. We're going to pass out more tickets so we can do drawings. Oops, used the wrong word, raffle. Drawings to help keep everybody engaged, and there's some really cool things. At some point, maybe a little pause, transition break, we will have, or I'll just be skulking about in the background and have bags of goodies that you can distribute in each of your tables, either the whole bag, you know what I mean. So it was really nice of them to have people donate the kinds of supplements and things that are going to enhance the quality of any endeavor that you're going to train for. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyway, I'm really honored to be asked to be here and stuff. Anyway, my name is Chris Turney, and growing up, thank you, honey. I want to thank my wife for helping me get organized and stuff, Michelle Turney. She really did a lot. Anyway, so these bags, and I also want to thank Hammer Nutrition because they donated magazines and samples of their Hammer Nutrition electrolytes and things like that. We went to Auburn Running Club. They donated a headband, which is where we're going to auction off. In the headband, you actually, it has some cool pads that you put inside. And then we went to Wild Runners in Old Town Auburn, and they have 9 t-shirts we're going to raffle off as well. Excuse me, I'm not very comfortable at speaking sometimes, but anyway, being an ultra runner first and getting into the riding tie was, I just fell in love with the horse aspect of it. But it took me a long time to find that seat. And of course, as you know, you have to do miles and miles and miles of riding in order to feel comfortable. And it actually wasn't until I got my own horse that I actually felt like I was in coordination with the horse, because he actually made me look better than I really am. And stuff, so I have a lot to owe to him. Okay, all right. So anyway, as you know, how was the heat out there today? Was it hot in the canyons?
Oven.
An oven, yes, exactly. And that's what we're going to talk about. Because the temperature at Truckee, the temperature at Squaw Valley, you're at 8,700 feet at Watson Monument. Robinson Flat is at 74. Well, it seems pretty good, except for the dust you're kicking up and all those kinds of things. There's still some patches of snow where the water's running down the trail, and that dust can hide a lot of rocks and those kinds of things. So those are a lot of the objects that you would worry about there. But it's not until you actually get into the canyons and you have to worry about the temperature, because it can climb 10, 12 degrees, maybe 15 degrees at the bottom of those canyons. We did a ride and tie here in Forest Hill in 1985, and a couple people can attest to that did that race. It was 111, 112 in Sacramento. It was 106 here in Forest Hill. So you can imagine what that's like. And we had to come into Chicken Hawk here. We went over into El Dorado Canyon and over to Forest Hill, finished there. So we didn't even touch we did a vet check at Michigan Bluff. But the heat index is another thing I want to talk about. And the heat index is a combination of the humidity and the temperature. And right now, it's about 20% humidity, maybe a little bit lower, not so bad. So when it's about 20% or 22%, the temperature that you feel right now, like in Sacramento was supposed to be 103, well, it's 103 with the humidity being about 20%. As it gets closer to 30%, 35%, 40%, that's when the temperature can really affect you and how your body is able to cool itself. Our bodies are amazing at adapting, but it's that shock of that first hot day that makes your body resist trying to cool itself. So as a former coach, as an ultra runner, I always make it a point to try and expose myself to the hottest day as possible. I take my friends and we do the training hill down by the confluence and No Hands Bridge, and we try to simulate the canyons here without actually having to drive up here. And it does a pretty good job because on those hills, on these canyon hills, there's no wind. In the morning, the wind comes up the river, and at night it flows downstream. Right now it's pretty calm and cool and it's comfortable, but as you felt today, it's an oven down in those canyons. There are 37 switchbacks going up to Devil's Thumb with no wind. So I made a couple of little things to talk about, and hopefully everyone has something that we can go on to. Like I said, our bodies are amazing at cooling themselves under the right conditions. When it is 103, 104, and you are exposing yourself, just get out there, get yourself exposed. If you want to, they say to wear a long sleeve, very loose, get yourself wet, it's always good to be out there for an hour to hour and a half. You don't really need to be there out there any longer. But I guarantee you, if you go out there and it's 1 degree cooler and you feel that wind coming off your skin, it'll immediately cool you down. It'll chill you like crazy. And it's amazing. But that first hot day, it's like you're gonna die and you're wondering why you're out there, why you're putting yourself through that misery. It's for the day that you're gonna expect the worst conditions here in the canyons. That's what you're really preparing for. There's, I always recommend hydrating yourself at least 72 hours before your event that you ride, because when you go up into that altitude in Truckee, the air is really dry. It can be cold at night, and because you're up at the altitude and it's dry, it could be like 5% humidity. That is going to make your cells in your muscles, in your breathing, get fatigued, especially if you haven't been used to it. If you're up there for 3 days, you're going to be at your lowest fatigue point. And it takes about 2 weeks to get yourself reacclimated. You're actually better off if you go up and the night before, get started and get out of that altitude as quick as possible, and those kinds of things. If you're going to, how many people use a calendar to track your days leading up to a race you want to really do? I suggest doing a calendar. Track yourself back 10 days from the ride, because the 10th day prior to the ride is the last time you should really do a hard physical effort for you as a person, and then you can slowly taper down, as you get ready for it. When I was doing the ride and tie, that's how I would prepare for it, but I also was training for the Western States 100, which was a week after, so all my training for the ride and tie just kind of, filtered into the 100-mile run, I did 100 miles in 3 days to get ready. And then after that 100 miles, I started tapering down and stuff. And by the time I was ready for the ride and tie, I was ready to run with anybody, whether it was 5-minute pace or 4:50, in the first 4 miles. Because in the start of a ride and tie back in the 80s, it was run as fast as you can, try to not get run over by the horse behind you, and and then survive. So anyway, so let's talk about the heat index. Okay, today was 94 here today, right? And 20%. So the heat index chart, you read it like a multiplication chart. So at 30, and you can look at the big chart if you want. And so at 94 degrees at 20%, it was about 90 degrees. That's how your body was feeling it, So, but if it gets up to 30%, still not so bad. But if it's like 106 and at 20%, still 106 out. But when you get to 30%, all of a sudden it's 116. You know, so it climbs up exponentially. You know, so you imagine what it was like down in the canyons when there's no wind and it's like an oven, and your body is, you know, struggling to cool itself off. Those are some of the problems you start to run into. Some of the problems with heat stroke, you know, you start getting the prickly heat or some of the goosebumps and those kinds of things that are first indication of dehydration. If you are, and that's one of the reasons why I always recommend to hydrate, you know, 72 hours in advance to help, you know, your body absorb the water, get it into your system, those kinds of things, because after the first 30 miles, everything you drank in those 72 hours, it's going to be gone, and you're depending on what you were drinking during your ride. If you can't, you know, your first indications is that your mouth is dry, you start to lose the ability to urinate and those kinds of things. And if you're at that point, you're already behind, because it's going to take you a half hour, maybe an hour to try and get yourself back hydrated. You know, as a runner, I developed the habit of trying to, you know, like a horse does, you know, vibrate my lips, excuse me. You know, because it's really hard to do that if your lips aren't moist. You know, I don't want anyone to just kind of do it, you know, do what you do normally, you know, whatever makes you feel good. I don't recommend trying anything new the day of the ride. Practice, you know, when you, like today was perfect for practicing using the electrolytes that you think you might want to use, or the different snacks and foods you want to use. When you're riding, it's really easy to forget to, you're so concerned on how your horse is doing, it's easy to forget about taking care of yourself. You know, and you should be drinking about 15 to 20 minutes every single time. You know, you don't want to guzzle your water. You know, it doesn't really no good. You know, just, you know, drinking 15 to 20 minutes at a time. You know, a little bit of time could be consistent throughout the day. You're going to feel much better. You have less chance of dealing with any heat problems, heat cramps, those kinds of things. You know, if you watch during Western States and those kinds of things, you see all kinds of runners who have either they're thrown up on the side of the trail and they're getting cramps and all those things. It's because they've lost the ability for their muscles and their stomach to deal with the glycogen. You know, they're running out of glycogen. Their core body temperature has risen from 98.6 degrees to above 101. When your core temperature gets above 101 degrees, you start suffering from heat exhaustion. And the symptoms of heat exhaustion can vary from muscle cramps, you know, your skin's pale, moist. You can start having some symptoms of being nauseous, and you could actually start vomiting. You know, you could have definitely headaches, weakness. You could feel some dizziness, and you might even have a slight sense of fainting, especially if you look down and you try to get up, or those kinds of things. When we were doing the Western States 100, Dr. Lin used to do some studies on the runners as we came through each of the vet checks. When you're doing the Western States, you have to be weighed every 7 to 8 miles from one vet check to the next, because if you were at the start of the race, if you lost 3 to 5% of your weight, they start to get concerned that you're getting yourself dehydrated, and you might get yourself in trouble down the trail. At 6 to 8%, then they start asking you, okay, well, do you want to stay? Do you want to sit down and get yourself hydrated? You know, 8 to 12%, they're going to make you stay. You know, because we've seen several runners who have let themselves go, and they've had to airlift them out. You know, and you know, you can imagine what that does if you're riding and you get yourself dehydrated, if you're throwing up, you're not going to be helpful to your horse. You're going to actually be a hindrance to your horse because it's going to wreck your posture, and now your horse is going to get tired. And that's definitely one of the things you want to avoid, because that horse, he's your partner, and you really want to take care of him as best as possible. When it comes to heat stroke, your body core temperature is 104 or higher. So this is where the heat index really makes a difference. Those kinds of things, because you sweat profusely, and then also when you have no more sweat, your skin is dry, and you have a rapid heart rate. You definitely you lose your appetite during heat exhaustion and during heat stroke. But everything you try to take down, it's coming right back up, because you have gastric juices coming up from your gut, and maybe even some bile, that are, going to be a problem. And those kinds of things. You definitely have headache, nauseous, fatigue, but also confusion. You may not really, someone could be talking to you, but you think you're answering them, but you're giving them the wrong answers that they're looking for, and those kinds of things. And heat stroke's very dangerous, because once you pass out, they need to get your body cooled immediately within 15 minutes. The different kinds of electrolytes that are out there today, back when I was running, they had Gatorade, and Gatorade is still pretty good, but Gatorade has a lot of sugar in it, those kinds of things. So we, in these bags, we have from Hammer Nutrition, we have little samples, and also from None, and, and those kinds of things. But then they also have some packets you can use after you ride to help with your recovery. Your recovery is actually more important than preparing to do the ride, because if you are tired 30 hours after you competed, you've gone too hard. 24, if you feel good, like, hey, you're not going to do this again, you didn't push yourself hard enough. 36 hours, well, the magic number is 30. 30 hours. So if you go out and you do a workout in the heat and those kinds of things, and if you feel good, 30 hours afterwards. But if you're, you did a good day, and those kinds of things. Let's see. Any questions?
Can you talk about the cooling effect of pouring water on your body?
Yes.
Specifically, I'm thinking about this trail, and you're drinking all you can, but
Oh, yes, exactly. And that's perfect, because they used to say that your head is, 20%, that heat rises, and you should cover your head, and you're required to wear a helmet and those kinds of things. But really, it's the surface area of your entire head, body, shoulders, and stuff like that you want to try to avoid the direct sunlight. So cool your body as much as possible when you're down and you're giving your horse water and those kinds of things. Make sure you pour water over your head and over your neck and your shoulders, your upper torso, as much as possible. When I ran Western States, I had a loose-fitting long-sleeve white T-shirt, and I would just get that thing drenched. It was dry within 5 minutes. So that's how important it was. But you can suck on ice chips, to help get the, to help get your mouth cool and start getting the saliva to start developing, because the cooling process when you ingest something actually starts with the saliva. It breaks down all the enzymes, and it turns the sugars into glucose, and as long as you have enough sugar and enough oxygen in your body will put itself through the Krebs cycle, and it'll get rid of the lactic acid. But once that glycogen starts, you start getting dehydrated, the lactic acid starts building up too much, and there isn't enough oxygen to break it down so that to get rid of it and out of your body. Because through muscular activity, the lactic acid and heat and those kinds of things. That's one of the reasons that your core body temperature rises so rapidly, the more you get dehydrated. Because eventually your body starts working against you and those kinds of things, like the engine of a car. You don't put water in the radiator, eventually it's going to blow, it's going to get too hot. You know, you're out there and all of a sudden you just feel like you're about ready to get sick and you know, maybe get nauseous. And that's because you're no longer burning the complex carbohydrates and the glycogen, because your body enjoys burning complex carbohydrates and fats at the same time. You know, when you burn simple sugars, you know, and those kinds of things, you can sprint right across the street so you can get out of the way of an oncoming car. But if you're going to do endurance or build up muscle strength and endurance, you really want to burn complex carbohydrates and fat at the same time. When you're losing weight, that's actually the best way to do it. That's why walking is actually a better exercise for losing weight than running, because you're out there and you're for 20 minutes, an hour. You know, if you're running, you're getting the cardiovascular effect, but you're also putting stress on your tendons and knees and joints and those kinds of things. And the older you get, the harder it is, you know, as I've discovered. Anyway, so some of the, like, if you need to, you can suck on some ginger, lifesavers. You know, lifesavers are made up of simple sugars, but it's an emergency and it'll help. You know, if you start taking simple sugars, your body wants to start producing insulin and stuff, and so it'll feel really good. But one of the things about doing the simple sugars and getting the activation of the saliva, we have little receptors in the back of our brainstem, you know, for dealing with the carbon dioxide and the oxygen levels in our body. Well, because the saliva is breaking down the simple sugars, it immediately helps to reduce endorphins and adrenaline, and it helps you get out of that feeling of low blood sugar. It only lasts for like 20 minutes, and then you start to feel, you know, so once you start doing that, you know, hopefully you can make it into the vet check and into your crew to get yourself some decent food and sustainability, you know, to end the rest, so you can move on to the next area. You know, when you're out there running and riding or whatever, you don't think about what you're going to be doing. You get to Robinson Flat, you don't want to think about, you know, what you're doing in Forest Hill until you actually get to Forest Hill. You want to take one station to the next, one at a time, because if you get ahead of yourself, you're not going to think about taking care of yourself. Any question?
What's your take on the wet scarves?
It's great. It's perfect. My friend Jim Howard, who was a great training buddy of mine, he took his hat, and you can buy these, you know, online or whatever, but this is a regular fishing hat and stuff. And as you can see, a lot of the ultra runners will wear something where it drapes over your neck and stuff, and the back of your neck, and stays cool. But Jim used to sew a washcloth on the backside of his hat, and then sew a sponge inside, so that when he would get to a lake or stream, he would wet it and stuff, and it would keep his head cool and all those things. You know, so, you know, keeping yourself cool is the most important thing, you know, because the weather could be like this, 94 degrees, you know, or it could be 106 here. You know, if it's 106, you know, you want to prepare for the worst, because it's better. You don't want to be surprised. You know, when you start at up there in Truckee, and you know, if the night is warm up in Truckee, it's going to be a hot day here. Just.
So as far as clothing, like, you know, like tank tops and stuff where your skin's versus like sun shirts and hats to cover you from the sun.
Well, you know, wear light, bulky clothes. You know, because I know you want to wear the leggings, you know, to protect you from the stirrups and those kinds of things. That's okay, you know, but it's your upper body that you really want to protect. You know, a lot of people have the safety vests and those kinds of things, and that's fine. You know, and I recommend using those if you're going to do it. But do what's comfortable for you. You know, if you've ridden enough rides, you had to qualify to get here, and you know what it's like. If you've ridden the Virginia City 100, you know that the first 25 is easy, but the middle 50 is really hard. but you're not going to deal with the heat that you're dealing with here. If you can get off and help your horse through the canyons, by walking down the hill and tail them out, it's good for them. Because if you're, like me, I worry about sitting on their kidneys, climbing out of these hills, those kinds of things. So whatever you've been practicing, don't change it now, practice for next year. Okay, make a list of, that's one nice thing about the calendar. How do you feel? How did you feel, during the different temperatures and different locations at different rides? What electrolytes did you try? Did it make you sick or you're a little nauseous? Because you don't want to try it again if that's the case. How dry were your lips, as you were out in the sun? When did the temperature get cool so that all of a sudden you feel like a new person? During the western states, coming through the canyons, your legs and everything like that, you feel like, oh shit, sorry, excuse me. I don't know if I can go on. But once you start going into the California loop and it's downhill, I was running 6-minute mile pace. And I was, all of a sudden, hey, I think I can win this thing. And then I got to the bottom of the river and I realized that I was dreaming, but those things, you'll go through those ups and downs, peaks and valleys while you're riding, and the heat has a lot to do with that. The amount of food that you eat. If you're used to drinking chicken noodle soup and stuff to get the salt and the broth, it's mostly about getting the liquid in you. Those kinds of things. Sometimes drinking a cold chicken noodle soup or cold beef soup, just the broth is really good, but it's also good to get, some noodles and other things into your system, because, as your body is trying to cool itself, it's sending blood to your skin, and not to your stomach. Your stomach will actually shrink, stay away from Coke, those kinds of things, because those have a tendency to dehydrate you. These electrolytes that they're coming out with are pretty good these days. There's actually a electrolyte solution that they offer online. You have to kind of decide whether you like it or not, but for every liter of water, half teaspoon of salt, and 2 tablespoons of sugar. And that's a homemade electrolyte solution, But you can add, other flavorings if you want to it, if it's, because, but I would definitely recommend chilling it, putting ice with it. Chocolate milk is actually a good source, for electrolytes if you're coming into a check, especially if it's cold, because it has a nice amount of sugars and the electrolyte solution in it. If you like milkshakes, because they're cold and they taste really good going down, but don't drink something if you've been throwing up. You want to try and get yourself back hydrated properly in little bits at a time before you try to do something like that, because you don't need to cause shock to your body. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I brought 3 bags just to kind of show you and stuff, and I can pass them around so that you can look at them. But
I'll just raffle them off.
that'd be all right too. Yeah. So, this is from Goo, and stuff, and the Goo paste, is like cake batter, and but what it does, it forces you to drink because it makes your mouth dry. Yeah, but so there's this is Roctane Ultra Endurance and stuff. These are primarily for after you compete and to help with your recovery. Okay.
Round of applause.